Okay, so this morning I want to cover a subject well, it's been splashed all over the screens last night and this morning. This is concerning the shootings, one in particular in El Paso, El Paso, Texas. Um, so this is on NBC News. El Paso shooting, 20 people dead, 26 injured, suspect in custody, police say. Governor Greg Abbott called it one of the most deadly days in Texas history. And of course, those of you who have been listening to the news, you know by now that apparently this fellow was angry about all these illegal aliens coming in, and so he goes and takes his AK-47 and starts shooting people. I also read that a teenager ran inside the Walmart to warn the folks inside the Walmart that there was a shooter outside, but nobody paid attention to him. Well, folks, that should tell you something, shouldn't it? So what's going on here, folks? Well, what I want to do, first of all, is to I'm going to read from something that I typed up this morning. And it goes like this. The title is "The Government Sold You a Lie." The government sold the people a lie for momentary pleasure to get more tax revenue. Yes, folks, this is where this all originated. The government convinced women to come to the workplace in the name of women's suffrage. Why? So the government could have more tax revenue. As a result, women started having fewer children. When women have fewer children, the next generation workforce and future tax revenue becomes diminished. I guess the government did not have sense enough to understand this, and so I guess they were more consumed with money right now. Well, this cycle continues until the government then spends more money than it takes in, which is what we see happening today, right now, as we speak. In fact, I think I'll go, what is it? It's federal government debt. As of December 31st, 2018, debt held by the public was 16 trillion and intragovernmental holdings were 5.87 trillion for a total of 21.97 trillion. Debt held by the public was approximately 70% of GDP in 2017 and ranked 43rd highest out of 207 countries, but we're talking about government debt. So what is the federal debt of 2019? The main culprit of public debt is budget deficits, which have surged under Trump. Well, not only under Trump, also under all the presidents before him, all the way to Nixon. Through the CBO now expects the shortfall to be a cumulative $1.2 trillion less than previous projections. The office estimates that annual deficits will start topping 1 trillion in 2022 from an estimated 900 billion in fiscal 2019. Now this is ridiculous, folks. But I will continue. With what I'm reading here. So now, folks, now they've got both the women and the men working, paying income tax to feed the federal government. And of course, what happens? What happens is women have less and less children to make up for them in the next generation. Okay, so by 2024, the government will no longer be paying on the debt, but on interest only. So will the government ever address the problem? Well, have they ever addressed it? No, of course not. Why would they? There's all kinds of reasons why they wouldn't. Money now is more important than what happens later. And of course, the other reason, one of the other reasons would be to admission, that would be an admission of guilt. Admission of wrongdoing by the government, and the government's not going to admit wrongdoing. The government's going to blame somebody else. You know, kind of like what they did with after the Weimar Republic. You know what happened after the Weimar Republic, don't you? The Nazis took over and blamed the capitalists. The capitalists? Yeah. They blamed the Jew. Why? So they could confiscate and pillage. You think the government is not willing to confiscate and pillage from the people who have the most money? Oh, come on, folks. That's what governments always do when they get into jam, whether it's kingdoms, democracies, or dictatorships. That's what they will do. But I will continue reading. The problem is with these people who the government in desperation, okay, I'm going to back up here. To solve the problem, the government opens its borders to those who have lots of children in order to hopefully fill the tax coffers in the next generation. By 2024, the government will no longer be paying on the debt, but on interest only. The problem is these people who the government in desperation invites in, they do not vet the people. It isn't desperation they're doing this. And there are consequences for not vetting the people they bring in the country. With lots of children, those people typically do not assimilate, as their values and allegiance are generally not the same. Which brings us back to Daniel 2, verse 43 through 45. Instead of addressing the problem, what the government will do what they always do and shift the blame on someone else, namely the capitalists. And who are the arch capitalists? The Jew, of course. And your preacher, that's right, your preacher will not say a single word about Daniel 2 verses 45 and 43 and verse 45. Why? Because it is politically incorrect to do so. So I'm going to do the politically incorrect today, and I'm going to go to Daniel 2. I'll start in verse 40. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, forasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things. And as iron breaks all these, and it shall break and bruise. Now the kingdom of iron, the fourth kingdom, the kingdom of iron, was Roman Europe. It is what we know today as Western civilization. Now Greece started Western civilization. Okay, Greece was the kingdom of bronze. The Greeks started the Bronze Age. So the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, forasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things. And as iron breaks all these previous kingdoms, it shall break into pieces and bruise. And whereas as you saw the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as you saw iron mixed with miry clay. This is where we start getting into the politically incorrect part. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas you saw iron mixed with miry clay, here we go, folks. This is the good part. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, because iron does not mix with clay. You're not supposed to talk like that today. You're not supposed to say that the races don't mingle. You're not supposed to say that the melting pot doesn't work. Now, I'm sitting here and I'm wearing the yellow star that the Europeans, the Romans, and the Muslims forced the Jews to wear in shame and dishonor when the Jews were living in their lands in medieval times. I'm not suggesting, I'm demanding that the scripture be fulfilled, where Israel gets all of its land back, as written in Joshua 1 verses 1 through 4. The name is correctly stated as Yehoshua. Yehoshua 1 verses 1 through 4. All of that land must go back to Israel, and all Israel, all 12 tribes, not just the Jews that are there currently, but all 12 tribes, including all the Jews that are still scattered out into all the nations. This doctrine of diversity must cease. Why? Because all the Jews and all Israel must be brought back to their own land. That means the doctrine of diversity must be reversed. And this scattering, this scattering of, or this doctrine of diversity provides, how do I say this, an excuse for the nations to hold the Israelites around the world a hostage against the will of Jehovah, our Father in heaven. But this doctrine of diversity is the cause of the strife that's going on in Europe and the United States. And as you read, you will see. And whereas you saw iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, as you see today happening before our very eyes, because iron does not mix with miry clay.